On February 6, 1994, a 15-year-old babysitter named Kristen Harton ran into the emergency room of a Louisiana hospital screaming for help. Behind her, in the parking lot, a man was bleeding out from a gunshot wound to the chest. He had not been shot by a stranger. He had not been robbed. He had been shot by the same man who, moments earlier, had been driving Kristen home from a babysitting job. That man was Harold Landry. He was a 47-year-old Louisiana oil millionaire. He had just tried to murder his lover's husband, inside his own car, in broad daylight, in a hospital parking lot, with a 15-year-old girl sitting 3 feet away. The victim survived. Harold Landry was charged with aggravated battery. He walked away with a suspended sentence. 16 years later, 4,600 miles from that Louisiana hospital in the English countryside, a 39-year-old Welsh woman named Lucy Landry logged into Facebook and posted 7 words. "I've never hated someone as much as I hate someone now." She had been Harold Landry's wife for over 10 years. She had no idea about 1994. Neither did her friends. Neither did her neighbors. Not one person in the pretty market town where she was raising her children knew that the American gentleman in the big house down the road had already tried to kill someone once and gotten away with it. Less than an hour after Lucy posted those words, she was running for her life in the dark on a country lane in Worcestershire, barefoot, bleeding, screaming loud enough for the neighbors to hear her from across the estate. Her children were asleep inside the house she was trying to escape, and the man chasing her had done this before. Harold Landry, known to everyone as H, was born into a large working-class Cajun family in Louisiana. Roughly a dozen brothers and sisters. No money, no connections, no shortcuts. What he had was ambition and the specific kind of hunger that only grows in someone who has had nothing. He built himself out of the bayou through the oil industry, designing cranes for offshore drilling platforms. By his 50s, he was a genuine self-made millionaire, well known around Covington, Louisiana, an employer, a man of substantial means, and a self-styled success story. His longtime Louisiana lawyer, Pat Fanning, described him with more honesty than most obituaries would allow. Fanning called him an angry guy, not easy to like, and when Harold Landry believed he was right, which was almost always, he was essentially immovable. That last detail matters more than almost anything else in this story. By 1999, Harold was 53. Divorced twice. He had 4 children in the United States, and by all public accounts, he provided for them. What he did not have was a life he found satisfying. He had money, he had properties. He was, in the words of CBS News, healthy, wealthy, and lonely. So he did what a lot of lonely people in 1999 were just beginning to do. He went online. Before we go any further, we have to stop at 1994, because this is where the whole story really starts. In the early 90s, Harold Landry was having an affair with a married woman. Her husband found out. Words were exchanged, and on the afternoon of February 6, 1994, Harold Landry pulled into the parking lot of a Louisiana hospital, aimed a gun at the husband, and fired. He had a 15-year-old girl in the passenger seat of the car, Kristen Harton. He had picked her up from a babysitting job that same afternoon. She was, by pure accident, the only witness to a shooting that could have easily become a murder. The husband survived, for the sole and specific reason that he had been shot directly in front of an emergency room. Kristen ran inside, hysterical, and doctors reached him within minutes. Harold Landry was arrested. He was charged with aggravated battery. And when it was all said and done, the millionaire from Covington received a suspended sentence. He never spent a full stretch behind bars for what he did. He walked back into his own life. 6 years later, when he met Lucy in that chat room, she did not know any of this. She had no reason to know it. She was a 28-year-old British music student. She was on the other side of an ocean. The man who reached out to her introduced himself as a wealthy, successful, older American gentleman. Which, technically, all of that was true. But somewhere in the biography he was presenting to her, an entire hospital parking lot was missing. Harold's online hand. It was Kinjin H. He was trolling internet chat rooms in the late 90s, the wild, unregulated social media of a very different era. Somewhere in that digital maze, he found her. Her handle was Misery. She was Lucy Davies, 28 years old. a Welsh woman studying music in England, a single mother raising a young son from a previous relationship. Her neighbors and friends would later describe her as bright, beautiful, and bursting with life. She had what one neighbor called an encyclopedic knowledge of classical music. She was gifted, warm, and funny. She was also 25 years younger than the Louisiana millionaire on the other end of that chat window. The relationship moved fast. Harold flew to the UK. The romance, in the public accounts that came later, blossomed within weeks. Not long after they met, Lucy was pregnant. They married, and then Harold Landry did something that told you everything about how badly he wanted a second life. He did not bring Lucy to Louisiana. He left everything behind: the oil business, the bayou, his old friends, the community that had watched him become a millionaire, and he moved to her. He bought a large country house near Pershore, in the English countryside of Worcestershire. He tried very earnestly to become an English country gentleman. His friends teased him about it. He said the lift instead of the elevator. He dove into the whole performance with everything he had. A daughter was born. Harold was, by every account, a proud father. He gave Lucy the lifestyle, the holidays, the security she had never known before. In 2002, his Louisiana lawyer, Pat Fanning, met the couple on vacation in Mexico. Lucy was vivid, attractive, clearly the center of Harold's world. Harold, in Fanning's words, doted on her. For a while, the fairy tale worked. But a man who is immovable when he believes he is right is a difficult man to be married to for very long. The trouble started, as it often does, in the small ways first. Friends and neighbors noticed that Harold could be controlling, sharp, demanding. Lucy, over the years, began to want her freedom back. She had married a man who gave her the world on the condition that the world stayed exactly where he put it. By early 2010, Lucy had reached the end of what she could tolerate. She had begun a relationship with another man. Harold, meanwhile, had also started seeing someone else, a woman he had been quietly slipping money to. The marriage was, in every meaningful sense, over. What was left was the question of how it would end. For a certain kind of husband, divorce is an unacceptable answer. Divorce means the wife walks away. Divorce means she has the last word. Divorce means, for a man who has spent every decade of his adult life believing he is right, the courtroom-approved conclusion that maybe he was not. Harold Landry was not going to accept that. The exact sequence of what happened inside the house that night is something a jury would eventually reconstruct from Harold Landry's own confession, forensic evidence, and the accounts of neighbors who heard what came next. An argument, in the kitchen. At some point, Lucy either pushed Harold or he claimed she did. What is not in dispute is what he reached for. There was a granite rolling pin on the counter. Harold Landry picked it up, and he swung it into Lucy's head hard enough that she screamed, clutched her head, and ran. She ran out of the house, barefoot, bleeding, into the cold February night, onto the dark country lane outside the mansion Harold had bought her, when he was still pretending to be the man who saved her life. She ran toward the neighbor's house. She banged on windows. She screamed for someone to help her. The neighbor did hear her. He came outside. He ran toward the sound. He was not fast enough. Harold Landry had followed her out of the house with a knife on that dark country lane. 65 years old, still in the shirt he had been wearing at dinner, he caught up to his wife, and he stabbed her 23 times. Lucy Landry collapsed on the road and died in a neighbor's garden, feet away from the door she had been trying to reach. Her children were still asleep inside the mansion behind her. The most disturbing thing about what Harold Landry did next was how ordinary it looked. He did not run. He did not turn the knife on himself. He did not stand over Lucy's body in shock. He walked away from the scene. He went and visited his new partner, the woman he had been seeing outside the marriage. He gave her money. And then he started walking home, on foot, along the same country roads Lucy had bled to death on. Police intercepted him during that walk, and when they did, he did not resist. He did not deny it. He confessed, verbatim, to detective. "Chia, I accept the fact that I've murdered my wife. I accept the fact I killed my wife." The case went to Wolverhampton Crown Court. Harold Landry did not deny killing Lucy. What he tried to do was reframe it. He admitted manslaughter and denied murder, claiming Lucy had provoked him, that any normal man in his position might have snapped the same way. His British lawyer argued, with what CBS would later describe as a nearly impossible case to defend, that Lucy had been the aggressor in the kitchen, that Harold had grabbed the rolling pin off a baker's rack in self-preservation. He implied she had threatened him with a knife first. The prosecution and the physical evidence painted a completely different picture, because the wounds told a story that no defense could rewrite. Most of the 23 stab wounds had been inflicted after Lucy was already on the ground. This was not a man defending himself from an attacker in a kitchen. This was a man standing over a bleeding, terrified woman on a dark country road and continuing to bring the knife down. The jury believed the evidence, not the story. They convicted Harold Landry of murder. Justice Foskett, delivering the sentence, called the attack unspeakable and unforgivable. He said Landry possessed a trait that, when provoked, could lead to extreme violence. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 16 years before he could even be considered for release. If he serves that minimum and lives, Harold Landry could theoretically walk out of a British prison in his early 80s. Lucy Landry was 39 years old. She was a Welsh musician with an encyclopedic knowledge of classical music. She was a mother of a young son and a small daughter. She was bright, warm, funny, and, in the very last year of her life, brave enough to try to leave a marriage that was suffocating her. The last words she wrote in this world were 7 of them on a Facebook post. Not a manifesto, not a plea, just a raw, exhausted sentence from a woman who had reached her limit. I've never hated someone as much as I hate someone now. 58 minutes later, she was running down a country road in the dark, screaming for help, with the man who claimed to have given her the world putting 23 wounds into her body for the crime of trying to leave. But the thing that haunts this case, the thing that no length of prison sentence can undo, is what nobody in England ever knew. 16 years before Lucy Landry died on that country lane, another woman's husband had lain bleeding in a Louisiana parking lot with a bullet in his chest fired by the same man. That man had walked into court, walked out with a suspended sentence, and walked into the internet with a chat room handle called Kinjun H. Lucy did not marry a millionaire in 1999. She married a man who had already tried to kill someone. She just was never told. There is a version of this story that never happens. A version where a Louisiana courtroom in 1994 does what courtrooms are supposed to do. And Harold Landry serves real time for what he did in that hospital parking lot. And he never becomes a millionaire on the internet. And he never finds a chat room in 1999. And Lucy Davies goes on to be the musician and the mother she was meant to be. And none of the rest of this ever happens. That is not the story we got. Rest in peace, Lucy Landry. You deserved a country lane you could run down without needing to. If this case shook you the way it shook me, let me know in the comments. What lands hardest? The 1994 shooting nobody in England knew about, the 7 words she posted, or the neighbor who almost got there in time. Subscribe to Noctis Crimes for a new documentary every week. The next case is already waiting in the dark.